This is Legends of '84, the story of BYU's remarkable national championship football team, told by the men who changed the world of college football and were forever transformed by that unforgettable season.
We knew we were going to be good. How good? Nobody knows.
I just never thought we'd lose. And each game that we won, we got more and more confident.
But once we played next to each other, we protected one another.
If you're not willing to prepare, then you're not going to be ready to win.
We are a peculiar people. We need to embrace that.
Brigham Young University has won the Holiday Bowl 24-17, and the Cougars are the only undefeated team in the nation. And I think they'll be number one.
They fake the draw, and this one is overthrown and incomplete and picked off by Holmoe. Holmoe down the sideline, has some blockers. He's going to score.
This is my 20th season as the AD. I was at BYU previously as a student athlete. My name is Tom Holmoe. I'm the athletic director at BYU. I grew up in a small town suburb of Los Angeles called La Crescenta. Played sports, I loved it. Grew up in an incredible community. Played every sport there was, everybody did. Spend most of my time at the park, just running around with my buddies. Played high school football, basketball, and track. I got hurt my senior year in high school, and I was getting recruited pretty good. I was a quarterback, and I shattered my finger on my throwing hand, had my hand in a big ball cast during recruiting season after the surgery, and most of the teams dropped me. And BYU was one of the teams that said, hey, you play defensive back, we'll take you as a defensive back. And I had some kids that were my buddies, probably about 7 kids that were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at my high school. 3 or 4 of them were really close to me. I got recruited by BYU, and they go, you should go up there and take a look, take a recruiting trip. So I did. I met Lavelle Edwards and Dick Fell, Fred Whittingham. Those were some legendary coaches at the time. It snowed like crazy. It was in January. I'm from LA. I'm a beach boy. Nobody wanted me to come to BYU. My parents, my brother and sister, my friends, my coach, neighbors. Nobody wanted me to go to BYU. They were afraid I would convert. I grew up in a faith-based home where we attended church. So I believed in God. So it wasn't really that big of a thing to me. I was like, I wasn't on the defensive. I just looked at it as, hey, this looks like a kind of a cool place. I had Ivy League opportunities and some military academy opportunities. I had some good choices, but I pushed them all away and chose BYU. When I got to BYU, it was tough. It was hard. This is 1978. Lavelle started, he was head coach at 72. It was his 6th years, early Lavelle days. We had great teams that I played on. Like, I was always a role player when I was in high school. I was one of the better players, but I wasn't the star of the team. We had really good teams. And so when I got to BYU, I just figured I'm going to do my best to play a big role on the team.
3 seconds left. 3rd and 10 at the SMU 41-yard line. McMahon all the way back in his own 46, throwing for the end zone. Receivers are there, defenders are there. It is in the end zone. Who has the ball? Touchdown!
Jim McMahon's my favorite teammate ever. And when I say that, we were friends, really close friends when we were here. I don't see him a lot, but I just texted him yesterday, and he lives life to the fullest extension of who he can be. He's not afraid or fearful of anything. And I'm not like that. I'm not saying that's who I want to be like Jim, but watching him play football, and I say he's my favorite teammate, no one enjoyed it more than him. He was great, but he enjoyed it, and he didn't feel anxiety, and he had fun, and he laughed, and he headbutted people, and he lift people up, and he was misunderstood, the most misunderstood kid in the history of BYU football. He was a rebel, especially at BYU, but one of the things I loved it was his relationship between Lavelle and Jim. Those two loved each other, and they would not let each other down. Lavelle knew what he was doing when he brought in Jim. He stayed with him, and they got to have this relationship where they trusted. Trust is a beautiful thing in relationships. The better the trust, the better the relationship. And Jim wouldn't let Lavelle down. So there were times when, Jim might have erred or not have followed every rule to the T, but he knew that he was not going to let Lavelle down, and he didn't want to let the team down. In the reality, he never missed a game. He had missed a game for injury and stuff, but he didn't get suspended or anything. And he was the best example of someone that would pay the price. I mean, he worked hard. He put a ton into the preparation for the game, physically and mentally. But he made it look so easy, and people didn't like that. People didn't like the way he carried himself. But like when he went to the Chicago Bears and they won a Super Bowl in '85, he was wounded. He had bad knees when he got into the NFL, or he would have been a Hall of Famer.
Back to number 46, Holmoe. Holmoe's got a lot of people helping him here. He's going to go in. Let's see if there are any flags. Down San Francisco.
At BYU, you take these religion classes, and I was strongly influenced by a couple teachers. One was a guy by the name of Dr. Joe Wood. He's an older gentleman who had a career in business and had a stroke and decided he was going to change. He went and got his doctorate degree and came back and taught at BYU. He taught religion and history. I think I took 4 classes from him. He changed my life. He's just reached my heart with his testimony and the way he reached out to me and ministered me. That was probably one of my strongest influences. You had a lot of players on the team who had served missions, that were married. You're in the locker room, there's 40 guys that are married. Multiple have kids, and I'm thinking, what in the world am I doing here? What is this all about? So I started attending the Lutheran church here in Provo, St. Mark's Lutheran. Great pastor and congregation that took care of me, looked out for me. They were pretty chill about Mormons and stuff. I kind of put up my defenses about the church, but I could sense and feel that things were good. And so I started looking into, on my own, didn't tell anybody, but I started reading books by the apostles and prophets. Neil Maxwell, he was my favorite, but I'd get tapes and listen and read. I didn't really read the Book of Mormon a lot. I did it for a class, but I just was interested in the history, and when I read the books, it just made sense to me. It brought me closer to the Savior. And I started comparing and contrasting and listening, and then I listened and I watched and observed. I watched the witness of a lot of my people that I was around. I saw great things happening. A lot of these people were like my friends in high school, so I'm like, there's something to this. I got drafted by the 49ers. We moved to San Francisco. We moved into a ward that has like 6 or 7 young married couples. I think 2 of them had a child, but the others didn't, like us. And I'm playing with the Niners, not a member, but going to church every Sunday. And I was with them, and just I learned more and more. Great bishops, great people in the church, and I learned more about the temple. The Oakland Temple was a beautiful spot right there. I got scared because I knew so much of it was becoming, this is true, I'm not sure about this, but this is good. We had a very young bishop who was my bishop of a ward, not too many years older than me. And he called me up one day and said, hey, you've been, married for 6 years. And he said, everybody thinks you're a member of the church. Why aren't you? And I said, I don't know, it's just hard, I'm trying, I'm trying, brother. And he said, in our church, I'm your bishop, I'm responsible for you. I'd like to ask you if you would fast with me. And I said, I'd never fasted before. So I fast, and about a week later, I come back to his office and meet him. He goes, how do you feel? I said, really, I don't feel much different. But, thanks for doing that. And it was a good experience. It was interesting. I think I gave a really good effort at it. And then about a month later, I was up in Provo. My wife's mom and dad had retired and moved from Anaheim to Provo, and I was up here in February, off season of right before my last year with the Niners. And I was laying in bed one morning, and I woke up, sat there, and I thought, I'm getting baptized. I'd had this thought, sometimes I say revelation, dream, but it was a constant thought that I would go to the pearly gates and I would meet the Savior when I die. And he would ask me, why didn't you ever join the church? I gave you everything. I gave you talent. I gave you a skill set that, You know, I gave you friends. I gave you a good mind to be a good academic kid. I gave you a great family. Gave you a great wife. Gave you a great career. Gave you everything. I gave you the gospel. I put it right out in front of you, but you didn't take it. Why? I need to know why. And my answer was because I was afraid of what my family and what my friends would think. That was my answer. And I go over and over and over in my mind. That was it. I keep doing that. And then I got to a point where that was true, and I couldn't go against that. And then that one morning I woke up and said, this is what I believe and this is what I'm doing. I have the agency. It's my choice. It's my salvation. It is an individual thing to be able to convert and be that. And then I knew that it was a family thing to be able to be exalted. And so I knew I gotten to that point where I had to make choices for my family. That day I went to BYU, and there was an equipment manager named Floyd Johnson who was a great missionary. And I said, Floyd, I need to get baptized. Let's go. He gave me a big hug. He's an older man. So let's go. I said, Floyd, it was like a Tuesday. I said, if I'm not baptized by Saturday, I'm not doing it. Went and saw the missionaries up on campus and had the discussions 3 or 4 times. And I said, no, we're ready. I'm ready. I've had the discussions. I probably know more about the church than you do. I called my bishop back home and said, sorry, Bishop. You know, I think that the fasting helped. It was just a delay of a month. But I'm getting baptized Saturday. And everybody back home who had worked for like 6 years, I said, I can't come home. I have to do this right now. And I think being in the environment of BYU where I was, and just having all those feelings and emotions and the people, and Dr. Joe Wood was there at the baptism, and all those things just were good. So I was baptized there, and that was 1988. I didn't really watch the team like every week in 84. But as they progressed, and I noticed in the locker room, there's a lot of rivalry, a lot of talk. It's, you know, it's Saturday as the games are on, and then Sunday you talk crazy with the guys in the room about who won, who lost. But I remember my wife and I, we went out to dinner on the night of the game. While we were eating at this restaurant, it was on TV. We made sure that that was the case. And so, you know, they won the game, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're undefeated. It didn't mean they won the national championship. Things had to happen after that. But it was just an amazing game, and I'm like, they went undefeated. We had 2 times where we lost 1 game. But it's hard to go undefeated in college, anything. It's hard to go undefeated in anything. I was so proud of them. It's still hard for me to comprehend 40 years later. It's hard for me to comprehend. I didn't win the national championship at BYU, but I learned 1,000 things. I always think it's interesting about reunions and high school reunions. When you talk about high school reunions, you say, did you go to your high school reunion? People go, nah, I didn't go to high school. I said, you know, how was your football team? How was your basketball team? You know, and what was your experience like? The people that didn't really participate, of course they're not going to go. So, like, it lasts. This goes back to you put in the effort to chase your dreams, to be the very best. No matter the result, it always pays off.
Sarkisian has time into the end zone. Touchdown, Lewis.
I loved growing up playing football in my backyard with my brothers and neighbors. And we'd play until it was dark.
This is Chad Lewis, tight end.
I wasn't necessarily the best. Let me rephrase that. I for sure wasn't the best player. Even all through high school, I was never my team's best player. But I would say I loved it as much as anyone, and I wanted it as much as anyone.
On a pump fake, floating it back to the end zone, caught by Chad Lewis. Touchdown.
My dad created what he called the Lewis plan. He said, here's the Lewis plan. I'll take off. He's a physician delivering babies, but he said, I'll take off, work, whatever I have to, and we'll go on hikes. We'll cruise around. We'll hike the coolest stuff in the world. And we'll go on fun campouts. And he wasn't down with competitive sports, especially coaches screaming and swearing at you. That was not his thing. And so the Lewis plan was his vision for us to become men, to become a family, to love each other. And one by one, starting with my brother Dave, then Mike, then Jason, we got into sports, from basketball to football to everything. So we all played everything growing up. Football, I would say, was our main sport as a family, and especially for me personally, it was my sport. And so it's interesting that my parents, neither of them had this great affinity for sports, but the way they developed me through this process was they supported me like crazy. They championed me. My mom was a hero at recognizing my gifts, even through the points of my life where I felt like I had no gifts.
Quick play, they throw it for the touchdown. There was no Redskin in the vicinity, and Lewis was wide open as the tight end split out. Are you kidding? This awareness by the quarterback.
The biggest event that happened in my life was 4 months before I turned 19 years old and went on a mission to Taiwan. And it was my dad had a massive stroke. The stroke was the result of a root canal that was abscessed. He had no clue. They didn't even have x-rays back then that would have been able to detect this. He also had a slight heart murmur at the time. And those two things, the root canal infection, abscess, and the slight heart murmur, made it a perfect recipe for his heart to incubate an infection. July 2nd, 1990, he has a massive stroke. Take him down to the hospital that night. His left side is totally shut down. He can barely speak. He's in severe pain. The doctor said, "It looks like you're having a stroke. Let's take you down, get an MRI, and see where the bleeding is and what's going on." The MRI showed massive hemorrhaging on the right side of his brain. The neurosurgeon yells out, "There's no time to be timid. We gotta go!" And at the time, I put my arms under my dad, and I pulled him over to the gurney off the x-ray table. And he was hurting, his body was gray, it was really scary. They ran him out of the room. Dr. Nielsen, the neurosurgeon, looked at me as he's walking backwards out the door, looking at my mom mainly. And he said, "I can't make any promises. All I can say is this doesn't look good." They go in surgery. He's in there until 8 o'clock in the morning. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the surgeon comes out, talks to my mom, we're all gathered around. He said, "Roger's had a massive stroke. Major bleeding on the right side. I went in, I did brain surgery, I found the bleeding, I put 4 clamps in his brain. The good news is he's alive. The bad news is he will never walk again. Get your house ready for a wheelchair. I don't know if he'll be able to speak or see. I don't know what he's going to be like when he wakes up." And we're all just in shock. My brother Mike, who's playing football at Utah, said, "No, he's going to walk out of this hospital. You don't know my dad." And this tough Navy-trained surgeon looks at Mike and was like, "You have no idea what I did to save your dad's life. He will never walk again. Like, you guys need to get ready for that." And then he focused on my mom the rest of the time and just said, "Hey, this is serious business." So we're just rocked.
Jets throws back edge of the end zone. It is there. Chad Lewis, rookie free agent, tight end from BYU.
He was in the hospital for 2 months. He wanted to get up and walk. And he started moving about 2 weeks later. Started with a shoulder shrug, started moving his leg a little bit. Dr. Nielsen, the surgeon, would pop in doing rounds and look at him. The fact that he was moving a little bit and shake his head and look, this is a miracle. I put 4 clamps in the right side of his brain. He should never be moving again. You guys think this is a miracle? I'm the surgeon. I'm the one that did the surgery. I know it's a miracle. And then he'd walk down the hall. And within 2 months, my dad walked out of the hospital under assistance, and he's continued to walk. It's been 34 years. In this time, he's hiked him once, which was a miracle. He had a team of people. He's hiked the Y a bunch of times. It took him 3 hours to get up and down the Y. This experience was so impactful to me personally and to our family. It brought us together. It kept us together. It was really difficult, challenging. My mom went back. She sold insurance, made money for her family. I went on a mission 4 months after this.
Interesting story, Chad Lewis. He's a Mormon. Went on his Mormon mission to China, majored in Chinese.
Before my mission, my brother Mike played football at the University of Utah. So I got to be friends with head coach Jim Fossil. And Jim Fossil wanted me to play at the University of Utah. I was really underdeveloped. I had no muscles. I was tall and skinny. I was a good athlete, and I loved football. He said, what you should do is go to either Utah or UVSC as a part-time student. Go on your mission, grow, and come back and walk on. I'd love to have you on the University of Utah football team. But don't go to BYU, because if you go to BYU, you're going to love it, and you're never going to want to come to the University of Utah. Here's the tender mercy. I'm on my mission for 2 years with a guy named Larry Harmer. We ended up being companions. Larry Harmer was an All-American defensive lineman at Olympus High School. He had a full-ride scholarship to BYU after his mission. And for 2 years, we talked about BYU football. Man, you gotta play with me. You gotta come walk on. You gotta play. This will be so fun. And we just went back and forth, pumped each other up. As a missionary, I decided I'm not gonna play football. I'm just gonna go to school at BYU, try and become a doctor like my dad. So I prayed and I thought about it. And one night, I'm sitting in my bed. I'm living in my parents' house in Orem, and I have a divine moment in that room where God completely answered my prayer. 100%, no question about it, to go play football at BYU. The feeling in that room was so sweet and tender and powerful at the same time. It gave me great confidence. I went in the next day and I said, I want to walk on to the football team. And they're like, is your brother Big Mike at Utah? And I was like, yeah. Well, why aren't you going to Utah? I'm like, I want to be at BYU. I want to play tight end here. And they're like, okay, come to practice. Before spring ball, we're going to practice on Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings at 11 in the annex. So Coach Chow said, I'll let you come and catch balls with the guys. I was like, sweet. So I went that first day and I warm up and I start catching passes. It's the first time in my life that I felt fast. I was not fast in high school, but now I felt fast. I felt like I was moving and I was catching the ball nice. And right in the middle of this first little practice, wasn't even an official practice. Guys are just throwing, and Coach Chow pulls me back there and he's like, now, tell me again what eligibility you have. And I said, I have 5 years to play for. Just his question and the way he looked at me, I knew I had a chance. I was like, oh my goodness.
First down, McNabb's toss, and it's caught. Touchdown, Chad Lewis.
After the first week of camp, Lavelle Edwards said to the whole team after practice, great practice. I want to see Chad Lewis in my office. And I was like, wow. Like, is there even a chance I could be getting a scholarship? Because they've already given their scholarships. As I'm walking off the field, Coach Chow comes up and walks next to me and he says, Bud, if this is what I think it is, you owe me a steak dinner. I'm like, oh, let's go. Please, let's go. I walk into Lavelle's office and he says, hey, you've been working hard. You're doing a great job. Love everything. We're going to put you on grant aid, which meant full scholarship. I didn't totally know, but I was like, does that mean full scholarship? He's like, oh yeah. I couldn't believe it. And I said, I just paid for myself. I paid for my own tuition. I said, well, what about tuition? He said, yeah, go up to the administration office and you'll get a refund. We're putting you on scholarship. He had no idea, my dad and my mom's history, that we had no finances to pay for my schooling. It was the greatest miracle ever. I could not contain my joy. It was the sweetest moment. It was so much hard work, but it was God reaching into my life and saying, I know exactly where you are. I know exactly who you are, and I'm going to help you.
From the 7-yard line. Boying guns it into the end zone to a wide open Chad Lewis.
I told my teammates that my goal was to jump over someone on the football field. And they're like, bro, you need to worry about first making the team and then second, getting on the field. Those two things happened, made the team, and I started getting on the field. Fast forward through the season, our last home game, we're playing UTEP. John Walsh throws me a pass 10 yards over the middle, and I turn upfield. And as I'm sprinting upfield, I think his name's Sam Rogers, comes to tackle me, and I leap over the top of him. He did not touch me. It was the sweetest thing ever. I'm running down the sideline another 10 yards, get pushed out of bounds, and I'm going crazy. I'm so pumped. It was like I never, ever had the confidence to do that in high school. No chance. But now my body's developed. I'm more mature. I have more athleticism. It changed my football life from then on. It gave me a confidence. It let me think right then that I could go play in the NFL. Even though I'm still skinny, young, I'm a freshman, it just gave me the hope, the belief, everything. If I could boil my college career down to one play, that's it. As a freshman, having the wherewithal and the vision and the hope and the belief to jump over someone, because that ignited something inside of me.
They're going to fade it out. Lewis, one-handed touchdown. What a catch.
I would talk to those 84 guys as they would come around. I'd talk to Mark Bellini. I'd talk to Robbie, was one of my coaches. I'd talk to the other guys and say, what was it about your team that you were able to be national champs? Our sophomore year, we finished 10th in the country. My senior year, we finished 5th. But through that process, I think I'd talk to everyone on that 1984 team. One thing was always in common. Man, we loved each other. We loved each other. We competed. We gave it everything we had, but man, we cared about each other. That stands out on good teams. That is true today. And so my 96 team, I would say the same thing. Like the BYU 1996 team had great talent at every position, but even more than that, we really cared about each other. We loved each other, and we were tight. We weren't perfect, but man, we were a team. And I think about that 84 team, and they just raised the ceiling, the standard for all the rest of us that have played at BYU since then. I can't see myself working anywhere else at this point. I love what BYU stands for, way more than football, way more than sport. The mission of BYU is really the mission of Jesus Christ in these latter days, to teach people and proclaim his divinity, that he really is the Son of God, that he really is coming back to the earth at some point. There's no other person to turn to. There's no other way to get back to heaven. And here we are at BYU making that humble but bold claim.
Coming up next episode.
Lavelle knew when he took that job that unless he did something different, it was going to be the same. They had not been successful prior to him taking it over.
I got like 90-something and scored a touchdown. It was back and forth, but that was the one Lavelle said, "Can't you run any faster? You're running like my grandma."
Thank you for listening to Legends of 84. This podcast series was produced by Eric Michael Robertson and Scott Christofferson, with Bree Ray Alpew as associate producer. Music by Stuart Maxfield and Eric Michael Robertson. Legends of 84 is a production of BYU Radio.